Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no copay. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hey everyone, this is a friendly reminder that we are here for entertainment purposes only. We may not even be that entertaining at times, but this is not medical advice. Talk to your doctor, check with your healthcare professionals before making any lifestyle changes or medicine changes. What we're talking about is our clinical experience and what we've seen. And so if you really want our advice, you can consult us. You can actually consult me as a doctor, or you can consult my guest and get all your questions answered. But we can't give free medical advice because we can't pay our bills with that, but we can help to educate you a bit and allow you to think a little bit. And always reach out to your medical professional before making any lifestyle changes. Thank you.
Discover a new path to wellness at Arizona Metabolic Health. Dr. Brian Lenskis offers advanced medicine and personalized care, treating the root causes of your health concerns, not just the symptoms. Whether you're seeking direct primary care, effective diabetes management, or medical weight loss, with a holistic approach, our team is here to guide you every step of the way. Visit ArizonaMetabolicHealth.com today to learn more about our innovative health solutions.
Hello, everyone. October is here. You believe that? Oh my goodness, it's the scary month where black cats and witches and goblins and all that kind of stuff. But we don't have to be afraid of the food. Stay away from those processed foods. And to help you do that, if you get a sweet tooth when all your kids are out trick-or-treating, Health Code's here for you. They have tons of recipes on their website, well worth going to check out. They do, the chocolate macadamia and the vanilla, and you can make it into all kinds of stuff. My favorite are the maple bars. Amazing. Just make a bunch of them, cut them up small. And when the kids are eating those terrible things that are making their teeth rot, you could have a healthy alternative. So Health Code, thank you so much. And my discount code with them is MedHealth, METHEALTH. Go check them out. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. I have someone way smarter than me here. I'm so excited. Because this is a topic that, when we're looking at the data, and we'll find out the truth on some of this stuff, because, there's a lot of hearsay out there and we hear things and we believe it to be true. But we have the expert here, Theresa Lyons, PhD. She's one of those people who understands the research, unlike the rest of us docs who kind of go, we're just looking at the headline or what the conclusion was. And so many times we're finding out they're bad studies, when we start looking at it. So Doc, welcome. It's so great to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So how did you get to your position? How did you, you're a science brain person. I was just looking at, and you do computational chemistry. As soon as I hear that, I'm like, my whole brain shuts down. I'm like, I'm not going to know what you're talking about. So tell people, how did you get into this? You're just someone who loves science.
Well, I'm a chemist at heart. So I have a bachelor's in chemistry. Then I have a master's in organic chemistry. So the real physical mixing of everything, lab glasses, code, and all of that.
That's what keeps a lot of us out of med school. That class, people will forget it.
Organic chemistry. Yep.
Organic chemistry, forget it. Yeah.
I have taught many pre-med students when I was in grad school. So I have a master's in that, and then I went on to Yale and got a master's in general chemistry again, and then my PhD, like you said, is in computational chemistry. And so that was at the intersection of math, computer science, physics, chemistry, obviously, and biology. So we were studying how to optimize drug molecules in proteins, but to do it all computationally. And then we would have counterparts in the lab that would have the assays to do that, and they would test what we were making calculations about.
Yeah, so you go from theory to, is this working practicality in real life?
And that's something that is my personality, right? So it's one thing to have a theory, but then you have to implement and execute, and it has to work in real life. So that's my background. And then how I got into autism is completely accidental. My daughter was diagnosed with autism when she was 3.5. And so after grad school, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, both in R&D as well as in the business side. And then when my daughter was diagnosed, I was like, all right, let me just come up to speed on this therapeutic area, right? Because as a consultant, I worked in many different therapeutic areas. And the first question I asked was, okay, what next? And it was just a terrible answer. It was, well, there's nothing really to do. Things usually get worse. This is lifelong. And as a scientist and someone who worked in the pharmaceutical industry, I'm not going to accept that as an answer.
Yeah, and that's the important thing. And you have a vested interest. That's why I was like, this is when you reached out, I was like, oh my goodness, I should be reaching out to you because it's so amazing what you're doing. And you have a vested interest. Some of the
But,
people
yes,
that I've
yes,
crossed paths with, their husband has Parkinson's. So they go like, forget it. I'm quitting my job. I'm going to figure out Parkinson's. And they fly around to all the world experts and go, what can I do? What can be done? Because the answers we have so far are not very good.
right. What was mainstream out there about autism, and this was about 12 years ago, was just that it is a lifelong disability diagnosis, and it's not true. I mean, it is not true whatsoever. So when I started to want to know autism and come up to speed, where did I go? I went to PubMed. Right. So at nighttime, I'd get my daughter to sleep. I would pop some popcorn, and literally, that was like my fun that I had. PubMed, popcorn, figure out autism, let's go. And
Wow.
that's where I learned how over the decades there are always these studies showing that autism is not a lifelong diagnosis. So back around 12 years ago, the stats was about 10% of those diagnosed with autism lose their diagnosis and have what is called an optimal outcome, meaning they lost the diagnosis, they're able to continue on in school without extra supports. So no speech therapy, no occupational therapy, no physical therapy, no additional learning, and fulfill their life, have friends, play sports, do what they
And
want
that's
to
just
do.
spontaneous, or is it because something they're doing in that 10% that's different than everyone else?
It's something they're doing.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Well,
So
and it's the
yeah,
same
it's
thing.
definitely not spontaneous. I wish.
And we can identify, well, I don't know if some people could just something changes and they outgrow it, but with diabetes it was the same thing. The ADA, American Diabetes Association, for years says this is a chronic progressive disease. There's no, like, you can't reverse it. And like, I've had 6 people, like when I first started doing metabolic health stuff, I had 6 people come off insulin, or 11 people come off insulin my first 6 months. I was like, ooh, like I
See, exactly,
and
right?
then once you see it once, okay, this can be done again. What do we do?
Exactly. Yep. So for me, I was very interested. Okay, that 10%, what did they do? And then in 2023, the latest research released on this shows that number is now 37% of kids with an autism diagnosis can lose it. Um, and so the
Wow.
studies now are getting
Goosebumps.
more into more as to like what exactly are they doing. So there's no study out there that shows what that 37% specifically did. They were tracking some minor things, like they weren't even tracking vitamin D status, which is like, oh, come on, I wish that is something so basic as like vitamin D, right? But that's also one of the first steps a lot of people take when they're trying to improve and optimize their health. So a lot of metrics like that weren't studied. They looked at like ABA therapy and things like that, and they found as the kids get better, then the parents do less of that therapy. So it's not even that they're necessarily doing more intensive traditional behavior therapy. That's not the case.
Wow, so that's really fascinating, the vitamin D, because we see the same things in metabolic health. The people who are dying of COVID had low vitamin D, and then we say, well, our diabetics have low vitamin D, and then you're diving into other realms like looking at bifidobacterium, the difference in that and different disease process. You go, wow, this is really interesting. And I was so surprised. My patients will tell you like that I've been talking about inulin for the last 4 to 6 months because these short chain fatty acids that you're talking about, if you're not getting this neural functioning down and protecting the gut microbiome, the gut lining and all that, I'm seeing a lot of wild stuff with atherosclerosis or LDL cholesterol improving dramatically just by without changing the diet, just fixing the gut lining, whether it be
Yeah,
with inulin or some probiotics and things like that, or taking out the things that are insulting the gut and see what happens. And so,
exactly.
and do you,
There's so much about that.
so in your take, like, as far as, your daughter got the diagnosis, and are you saying, why did this happen to my daughter? Or were you saying, okay, she's got it, I'm not going to worry why it happened, let's fix the problem?
So I
Or a
went
little
through
both?
a little bit of both. I mean, definitely, I felt guilty. I was grieving. I went through all of those emotions that you would expect. So it's an emotional time because when people are telling you nothing is going to be able to change and things are just going to get worse, right? Now you take that and project out, 10, 20, 30 years, and you're just taking misery and projecting it out. So that's not the best thing to do.
Yeah.
But of course I did it. I'm human, so it was more just like, all right, what I tried to be as healthy as possible, right? So like from what I knew back then. So it wasn't as if I, it yeah, it was a difficult time. There was a lot of emotions for sure. But eventually I pulled myself out of that, like how did this happen? And it became more of, okay, what do we do now? Like
Yeah, now you're in the situation. What do we do
this
now to
is
fix
it.
the problem?
Yeah. We
Right?
come to acceptance, right? You go through all
Yeah,
those
yeah.
like, okay,
Anger,
let's
frustration, all this stuff. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and so then it's more just about like figuring it out. So I started talking to different parents. I started talking to different doctors, and really understanding this field, as I call it, of how are kids regaining health? How are they having this optimal outcome? Everybody wants that for their child, right? We want optimal outcomes, and so it was really starting to understand what are the impacts and understanding the science, looking at the different clinical trials that have been done, looking at the different case studies that are reported in the literature. And there was so much information about how it could change that it was just, believe it or not, it was overwhelming. It was like, wow, where can we start? So after after doing this for many years and working with different parents, I kind of jumped the jump the story a little bit, but what I've been able to do is create something called the Navigating Autism Matrix. And so it organizes all these buckets that parents really have to pay attention to so that nothing is missed. So it's diet, it's healthcare team. Doctors make a huge difference. The types of tests, the medical tests that you do make a difference. You want quality information. So there's a lot that goes into healthcare team. And then we have mindset, because mindset is huge for the parent and the child, and so much is interrelated.
Oh
So we
yeah.
have mindset, then we have supplements and prescriptions. Because if you have a good healthcare team, they're going to know like what is important to focus on for your child. And then we have education, probiotics, and celebrating success. So all of this has research. And so I had to go deep into each of those buckets to understand, all right, these are what's important. And then it creates synergy. You know that when you start like changing the diet, like you were talking about, taking out the things that are inflammatory or insulting the gut, right? Causing problems, right? Stop taking those kinds of things. Do an analysis to understand what is it that my child actually needs and then start providing it to them. And then you can see this amazing change start to take over. Learning becomes easier. Kids like going to school, they start showing they've been learning all along. It takes a lot of work, but it's so worth it.
Wow, it's so amazing to have someone like you, because like, just to hear that 10%, right? Now you're saying
I
37%
was
in some cases.
37%, not me. That's the research.
Yeah, that's
I'm
the
from
research. I mean, but to
Massachusetts.
hear
Yeah.
that, I've never heard that. This is the first time I've ever heard that it can be,
Wow.
but I've seen that it can be improved for sure. Like my niece, she was, and I don't know if this is typical. I would love to hear your take on it, but she was like living on goldfish and gummy bears, and like everything she ate was horrific. And when they tried to give her other stuff, she would lose it, right? And she was morbidly obese. And so we were there visiting in Kentucky, and my sister-in-law asked me, I go, look, I'm not an expert in this area at all, but maybe just watch this one film because it really impacted me. It's called The Magic Pill. Jason Fung was in it. They were talking about changing the diet, and they showed this girl at first, she could no eye contact, no interaction. Then
Mm.
the end, she's smiling and she's human, connecting with people. Like, wow. So my niece, they said, they go, let's get rid of this cereal, the sugary cereal and all the bad stuff. And they start giving her real food. And she got remarkably better. She lost weight. And there's this, they're very like OCD in a way. Like she goes, I'm getting my 10,000 steps a day and I'm doing it no matter what. If it's snowing, I'm doing it. Like she's like, she had to do it like in her mind. And so she ended up getting so much better. And she was doing great. They could take her out to dinner and she wasn't having meltdowns like she was before. And then, interestingly enough, they had family. It was like 4th of July, and they had family in from the South, and they ate terrible food for 4 or 5 days. All of a sudden, she started losing it and getting really upset. And she went up to her room, and she said, "You know what, Mom? Like, my sister-in-law went up to check on her, and she said, Mom, my brain doesn't work on this food." And she knew, like she knew
Yeah,
it. Like no one had to tell her. She said, "It, my brain's not right." So,
yeah.
it's incredible.
It is incredible, but stories like that in autism are common. And some people see these big changes when they make diet changes, others don't, but it really depends on what the root issues are for that person in health. One thing we should talk about with autism diagnosis is that it's based on observation. So there's no lab test that gives you a number that says, okay, we're above this, so that means autism, and below this means not autism. So this is where it gets so frustrating for parents and also for physicians because the diagnosis is subjective. So you're really just looking at symptoms and how someone can function in the world. And that's why it gets really frustrating sometimes about getting a diagnosis, and then seeing how things change. You can, like, there's like those 7 categories, all of those things can start to have someone really optimize their health. And that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about changing who your niece was, right? Like, she sounds like she's a very smart and determined person who, once she started feeling better, you could see so much opened up and she was able to start to be who she wanted to be. Like, no, I want to eat good food. I want to eat food. Like, she's taking responsibility. Look at that mindset. Like,
She was in her late 20s, and she started showing emotion. Like her sister got pregnant, she was so happy, she started crying, and her family's like, we never saw her cry for like being empathetic and happy, and so seeing that, you go, wow, it's there.
yeah,
We just
no,
have to
it
tap
is
in.
there. It is completely there. And one thing we could talk about, just to keep on this stream here, is just how kids are learning all along, right? So your niece probably had all those emotions and all those thoughts all along, but for whatever reason, her body didn't let her communicate that or show that. And so when you really start addressing the health issues, that's when things can really change. So I know in the news, right, on Monday, President Trump had a whole news conference about, one of the things was Leucovorin, and that's something we could certainly talk about because that is, so many times a health issue that when it's addressed can have huge life-changing impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I would really love to hear that, and I just take one step back. Are
Okay,
are
yeah.
are the stats? Because people say something like they'll say millions of lives were changed by this, but well, there's no data to support that we're saved. And so when they say, well, 1 in 31 now is diagnosed, do you think that's correct, or do you think that's an overstatement, or do you think going from 1 in 30,000 to 1 in 31 in the last 30 years or so, do you think that's an accurate estimation?
I think so. I definitely do. It changes per state. So different states have higher incidences than others. But if you go into any public school, you can see that the classrooms have changed. And you can just look at the number of kids who have IEPs. So IEP is an
Exactly.
individual education, and you have to qualify to get those with medical diagnosis. So there are 8 diagnoses that then qualifies person for an IEP. And the amount of kids with IEPs are keeping pace with the amount of, change in that diagnosis. So I
And is
would
it
I would say
true? Is it true that in more rural areas, like the Amish, they're saying that it's very low incidence versus inner cities?
there is definitely geographical impact. There are some Amish with
Yeah.
autism.
Yeah, but
I
not in 1
definitely
in 31. They're saying they go extremely rare. It would be like 1 in 30,000 maybe or something crazy like that. I don't know exactly, but I was just curious about that because they're saying it a lot now. And
I
then
haven't read. Yeah, I haven't. I can't think of a publication. Maybe I'll look after we get off, but I can look to see if there's a publication on the Amish and their autism rate. Rates do vary. So you know, it's easy to say that there's more pollution in the cities, but that's not always the case, right? Because if you're living near a farm and they're applying pesticides, you could end
mm,
up getting more of environmental exposure than someone in a city. So there's so many different factors, and when you understand the root causes of autism, then you're looking for those that are around the child.
yeah, what do you
So
think root cause? I mean, what do you think? Like, you go, okay, these are the risk factors or these are the big things. Right now, they're saying Tylenol, right? And you go, is that just a red herring that there's other things that the Tylenol is influencing? Also, maybe a detox. And I would love to hear if you have any thoughts on MTHFR. I've heard that thrown around that you can't detox as well and methylate. So maybe that draws us into the Leucovorin discussion.
yeah. There's many different potential root causes for a child that might be struggling with their health and then it resulting in an autism diagnosis. It can be so simple as vitamin D deficiency. So
Wow.
I have seen huge changes in kids. And again, it's all about doing the proper blood test, having a quality healthcare team, right? So this isn't I don't try to get parents to guess and, oh, try this, try that, because you end up worn out. That's
Yeah.
not good for your mindset because then you're like, oh my gosh, I tried so many things and it didn't work.
Yeah.
But that's not really the case. You want to be very strategic in what you do, and in the kinds of tests that you use and the doctors that you work with. So in like one case I'm thinking of, there was a child who their vitamin D was 15. They weren't sleeping, they were irritable. Just speech was more on the repetitive side. There was some speech, but it was definitely not really helpful in the most sense. And so when they did the blood test and they optimized that D3 and K2, take that at the same time,
Hmm.
um, then the child started sleeping, and then a lot of different behaviors at school started to decrease, right? And that's something so simple as a vitamin D deficiency, and that was like your classic deficiency. Typically if someone's not taking any supplement with vitamin D, they're going to be sub 20 on their blood work. Conventional medicine says 30 or above is good, and functional medicine, when you're looking at, okay, I want my health to be optimal, not just good, right? Then functional medicine doctors want that number to be 60 or above.
Yeah, that's
And
exactly what
optimal,
I look at too in my
yeah,
diabetics because all the time the vitamin D3 is going to be 15, 12, and you go, this is not good.
exactly.
Yeah.
If you don't supplement, right? But so much can change there. So it's important for parents to start with a lot of these basic health aspects before getting, really fancy and getting into like stem cells and
Yeah.
hyperbaric oxygen chambers. And, like there's definitely a lot of really basic, non-controversial medical things to do to make sure that your child has what they need. And someone who's a picky eater, right, is going to have a lot more deficiencies in different things. So it becomes that ebb and flow of, okay, let's change diet like your niece did, right? But that wasn't easy. But that wasn't, it
But do you think
wasn't
the diet mess up the gut microbiome, then it makes you want those kind of foods? Or do you think it's because you're eating that kind of, is it because you're eating that kind of food, or is it because of the pathology that you crave those kind of foods? See what I'm saying?
So
Like chicken and the egg.
a lot of times with autism, there are different gut infections that cause those cravings. And so it has to be twofold. And actually, I usually talk to parents about having like a threefold approach where you isolate if there are gut infections, and the microbiome in autism is known to be less diverse, right? This is an established scientific fact. It's
Yeah.
known to be less diverse. So really focusing on gut infections is important and clearing those, right? Changing the diet, because if you don't change the diet, then you're just feeding those gut infections, right? And so then it's really hard to ever break through and get that optimal health. And then also repopulating the gut with probiotics. So those are the three aspects that are really important for parents to understand when they're thinking about the gut. And it's not just one singular thing. It's all these different things that add up together for that change.
And then the prebiotics, as you talked about, like inulin, things like that, that are going to help feed the good microbiome and kind of bring that balance. So are you seeing, I don't know if you're following it at all, but are they seeing an improvement in the diversity of the gut microbiome with these treatments? Or are they not
So
really
like
looking?
37% I can't answer
Yeah.
with like medical information as to what exactly they did. When I talk to parents individually and with parents that I work with, I know what they did. So it's much easier, but it's always a combination of those seven things that we talked about. So,
And
you
it's
know, the
bio-individual too for certain people, right? Like there, some people are going to respond to
100%.
one thing. It depends why, what the underlying pathology is. But it sounds like there's low-hanging fruit. You go, look, vitamin D, like so replacing the vitamin D seems to improve symptoms. It sounds like
Correct.
it's not just a
Correct.
marker is what I'm getting at. It's that like going out in the sun is not going to be better than taking vitamin D3 supplements. It's
No, no,
getting the
no, no.
vitamin D3 up.
Getting the vitamin D, because what's also important, right? So just think of this example of someone who has some type of gut infection, right? And let's say they're deficient in vitamin D and they're not sleeping well, right? So that means like diet is off, learning is off. And so when you start, let's just say something basic with vitamin D, that might help them sleep, because usually you take vitamin D in the morning, that helps produce the melatonin at night in the gut, right? So a lot of times what kids see when they start, parents really love this part, is if a child's having difficulty with sleeping, a lot of times vitamin D, when you get it to the optimal range of around 60 or so, then sleep improves, right? And so quality sleep means, right, you can now detox better, right? So now the cerebral spinal fluid is doing its job and flushing out the brain, right? So then that means, okay, whatever toxins the child were exposed to, now maybe they were exposed to mold and heavy metals or different pesticides, but maybe they weren't, right? So this is where autism can be so varied, right? And looking for those root causes, but you've got to take the body as a whole to really understand that. And there actually are research studies showing that autism symptoms increase when a child does not get quality sleep. That there's two studies. I can't believe that people really had to legitimately study this, but you can see, and they have it documented, that autism symptoms like irritability, obsessiveness, challenging behaviors, all of those things, those actually increase when someone doesn't get good sleep, right? So if that is
And
true,
that's in all of us. All of us are like that, right?
100%,
You crave sugar,
100%.
you eat worse, and you're grumpy with people, and then you get more stressed because you didn't sleep, and then you get to the cycle where you're.
Right? And then your immune system starts getting worn down
Yeah.
because your thoughts are terrible and what you're experiencing is terrible, right? So you're just going in a bad direction, right? But it literally was studied. There are two research publications that studied that. And so also when I read those, like back in the day, I thought, all right, if the symptoms can get worse with bad sleep, they should be able to get better with good
Mhm.
sleep. And then what else could make them better, right? So when I read that research, I was like, okay, like autism is not permanent. It's not set in stone. If bad sleep can really make things worse, then I know other things can really make it better, and I just have to understand it.
That's the huge point, because when people think there's nothing I can do about it, you just got it, too bad. They don't even try. So they go, just let them sleep and eat whatever they want. And they don't even try to make things better, because you don't think it's useless.
Right, right, right. And that's a
Um,
child. That's a child who has thoughts like you saw from your niece when she started optimizing her health, and I mean she really took ownership of her health. Then she could connect in so many ways, but she was understanding that all along. That wasn't like probably the first time where she felt emotional. It was just the first time she was able to express it.
so do you think it's a buildup of toxins that's a contributing factor, or as one of the factors? Like,
Well, so that's where genetics and environment
mhm.
interact. So not every child with autism has genetic predisposition to detox challenges. And this is where it gets confusing in many sense of, oh, okay, what worked for one child doesn't work for this other child. Right, obviously, right? But if you're doing testing, right, if you base everything in scientific logic and get a good understanding of the biology and chemistry of this person that's in front of you, then you could be very specific. So some kids have issues with detoxing, right? And then if they're not sleeping, that's compounding, right? So you're not detoxing at night, and then they have genetic predisposition for having difficulties with detoxing, and then they're exposed. Let's say they just eat non-organic food, right? Something like that can help build up toxins in someone's body. It doesn't have to be something catastrophic as like living in mold or something, but it certainly can be. So this is where there's so many different possibilities. But if everything is just rooted in science, then it takes all this guesswork away.
Had they seen correlations between breastfeeding versus bottle fed and autism rates? I mean, I don't know if that's been studied or not, but it's always been
I
in the
have
back of
to
my
look at
mind.
that.
Yeah, I
I
just
would
don't
have to look.
know, because we're looking at the gut diversity. So, if the child is born with decreased gut diversity to start out with,
Right.
that I was just curious about that. I don't know that it's been looked at. I haven't seen anything on that, but I
I
was
haven't
just
I'd have to
curious.
look at that. Yeah. I'm
And
not sure
so
about.
nutritionally, I mean, what are the low hanging fruits? So you go, look, a majority of people that I've worked with, or with the research I've seen, are there certain things you go, okay, this is like optimizing vitamin D seems like a clear cut, easy
Yep,
thing. Are there
definitely.
other nutritional deficiencies like elevated homocysteine or low folic acid, or they can't, methylate the folic acid, those kind of things?
Well, we can talk about Leucovorin now because
Yeah,
that was
absolutely. Yeah, let's talk about that.
so Leucovorin. What it is prescription vitamin B9, right? So folinic acid is the name it's given, but basically it's prescription vitamin B9 that is formulated in a way that the body can utilize. So that's the way to think of it. And there have been 5 small clinical studies around the world, not just in the US, but around the world, looking at something called cerebral folate deficiency. So, what happens is in about 70% of kids with autism, they have antibodies in their brain that block vitamin B9 from being able to be utilized in the brain. So it's very simple, right? They have antibodies, it's blocking B9 to get into their brain. And usually, what results is speech being very difficult because the brain just doesn't have enough juice to produce the speech and to um, operate the way it could optimally, right? We're all about optimal. So, if a child takes the blood test, which is called the folate, that's called a frat test. So it's a blood test, not everyone's favorite to do on a child, but it really gives quality information. It will tell you if this child has antibodies or not. If they have the antibodies, then it's clear cut. You would give them leucovorin because their body is blocking B9 from being utilized in their brain. So it's a very simple approach. It took the first clinical trial was back in 2009, I believe. So this has been really studied quite a bit. The thing is, it was small clinical trials that have been done so far. So there's been 5. The upside to B9 is huge potential, right? The child starts speaking, they start interacting more,
Mm.
they connect, like so the upside on that is huge, right? And the downside is, okay, what are the risks? Doctors are always thinking, okay, what is the potential risk? So hyperactivity is certainly one that can happen. Disruption in sleep, So, you don't give B9 late in the day, right? I mean, there are a lot of really basic things to make sure that these downsides don't happen. And the other thing is really titrating it so that you're not just blasting the brain with a lot of B9. It's a really slow titration so that the child's body can just get used to the B9 and utilize it in a way that's gentle and easy. Um, so that's the whole background to leucovorin. It has been well studied, but just in small clinical trials. So nothing more than 100 kids. I think 80 might have been the maximum number of kids, but there's been 5 different studies in 4 different countries.
And in the studies, do they do the frat testing first and then see if they have
They
the?
do,
Yeah.
yes. So
Okay.
they say that leucovorin, you have the best results when giving someone leucovorin if they are frat positive, which makes sense, right?
Hmm.
So some doctors still trial giving the child leucovorin in small doses to begin with, and then if they're responding to it, it's B9, right? So like if they're responding to it
B9.
and
B9 means it doesn't cause harm, right? Pretty much.
no, no, not
B dash nine. But
yeah.
yeah, so and B9, can you just get that over the counter like at
So
health food stores,
prescription
or is it all prescription?
prescription is what the Trump administration has given approval for. It's the first prescription approved to treat autism, is how they're describing it, because it is impacting speech so much for the majority of kids. But again, as a parent, you would want to do the frat test because if your child is not frat positive, yeah, you can talk to your doctor and trial a little bit of the leucovorin, a low dose, and see if there's any improvement. But you want to shift your focus to then, okay, what does my child really need? So it's really important, I think, to do the test. And I'm always an advocate for getting data that is very specific to the child and then, taking that time to really optimize. The other thing to then consider is why, let's say this child is 4 years old, why does this 4-year-old child have an autoimmune issue, right? So when you have antibodies in the brain, that's quite serious. So you really want to start to look again at the health as a whole. So, why is the body attacking the body in the 4-year-old? And then what steps can I take to really nourish that body, right? You have to figure out why is the body on such alarm alert? Is it a food allergy that or sensitivity that just hasn't been discovered yet? A lot of kids with leucovorin, when they're responding well to it, doctors also take them off dairy because they've found there's a correlation between dairy creating antibodies and an immune response in kids. So they
Mm.
stop the dairy. And that's how you can see there's all these different buckets that you have to keep track of, but they're logical and they really make a difference.
So wild you're saying that too, especially when you say they have a less diverse gut microbiome. So I would think that a lot of antibiotic use when they're first born, that would affect the diversity of the gut. And so
It certainly can. But
as a
I have worked
potential,
with kids who I haven't seen like one consistent thing. I've worked with kids who's never taken antibiotics. I've worked with kids who, just
who haven't
different
been vaccinated, who have
countries,
been vaccinated,
different
like
food.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
just
It's
all of it.
multifactorial. That's very clear. Like
Yes.
you go, it's not just one thing you did wrong. Like, oh, you shouldn't have taken this medicine. The
Yeah,
Tylenol did it
yeah.
by
We
itself.
cannot
You
blame the
go,
parents. They
yeah,
did not do
yeah,
it.
that's a
There's not
huge.
a single parent out there who did something purposely and was like, ah, who cares? I don't care if they get autism. Like, there's no parent thinking like that
Exactly.
whatsoever.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to say because a lot of people feel guilty. Like, what did I do wrong? Could I have done something? And is it genetic or not genetic? And is it true that once you have a child with autism, the next child has an increased risk of autism also?
That is true.
Yeah, so it could be something in our gut microbiome or something that we're exposed to as a toxin or whatever that makes us more likely. And as far as I know, it's more on the mom than the father side, or we don't
No,
know.
no, the age of the father. So,
Yeah, age of the father. Yeah.
age of the father impacts an autism
And
diagnosis.
that could be that you had more time to get exposed to more chemicals or whatever it might be.
There's
That's an issue, right?
There's so many. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
it's so
definitely.
complicated. That's why I'm so glad you're diving into this, because I saw one of the case studies that Sabine Hazen did with the gut microbiome uh, transfer, the fecal
You know, the fecal transplant.
transplants,
Yep.
and market improvement, and it with dementia also, and you go, gosh darn it, how much of this? And when you said, this autoimmune thing, and I really, I do more functional medicine type stuff now, so I'm looking more at the gut microbiome and the gut lining and leaky gut and things. And I have yet to see one person who has an autoimmune disease that didn't have leaky gut or a bunch of gut inflammation or narrow gut microbiome. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, yeah. I have a lot of parents who are responding to videos that I have about Leucovorin, and a few parents have asked, okay, well, what else should I give with it? And I'm like, that's exactly the way you want to be thinking, because it's not when you have antibodies in your brain, you can't just give B9 and think, okay, that's going to fix everything. It's not. That's going to provide some relief, but you really want to go further and say, okay, what is causing this? Why is my child's immune system on so aggressively like that that it's attacking its own body? So those are like the bigger type questions that parents need to be asking, especially if their child comes back frat positive.
I know there are other things as you're looking at the data, and as these kids get older, are there increased risk of cardiac disease, diabetes, obesity, these kind of things that are like comorbid factors?
Well, the very sad fact is the life expectancy of someone diagnosed with autism is 36 years old.
Wow. Yeah, that's unreal. And
That's yeah. So
do you
it's
know what
really
the cause of, is there a overwhelming cause of death like cardiac disease or cancer, or is there something that why that lifespan is shortened so much?
so for those that are on the more higher end of the function, the spectrum, it's suicide. And for those that are more on the lower end of the spectrum, it is accidents and epilepsy.
Oh, yeah.
So things like drowning, running away, and epilepsy. So they're definitely, yeah.
And are there any studies that you came across? I'm just curious because this is my area of what I do is like ketogenic diet or cutting out processed food, that there's better outcomes in these patients.
They're definitely so
The reason I ask, I'll tell you why
outcomes.
I'm stepping back and asking this question. So just anecdotally, I have a patient, he's carnivore for the last 2 years, and his sugars are high, his A1C is 6.3, his inflammatory markers are high, and he already had seizure disorder, but his seizures were not getting better. So I said, maybe your numbers don't add up. Your triglycerides are high. No one on carnivore diet has a high triglycerides. It just doesn't happen, right? Because we're not eating any sugar at all. So we look, and he had leaky gut, inflammation in his gut. We fixed that
Mm.
problem, and now all of a sudden he has no more seizures. And so probably part of why the ketogenic diet works for seizure disorder in particular is that maybe these ketones are healing the gut lining that's already screwed up, and maybe that was the initial pathology that was causing this inflammation in the brain, because all these things that we're looking at inflammation everywhere and trying to decrease that.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about going ketogenic, right, is you're taking out not just gluten, but you're taking out all the grains for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of mimicry between rice and gluten on the microscopic level. And the other thing to really know about with diet is yes, gluten makes the gut permeable, but it also does the same thing for the central nervous system.
Exactly. Yes.
So this is where you get that synergistic effect. And that could be a reason why your patient saw a change when you really started addressing the gut. Because if you can, so many times the immune system gets worn down just from what's been released into the body from the gut.
Exactly. Exactly. If you're
That
fighting all the
shouldn't,
time, there's battle all the time because this bad is
yeah,
this bad, and
all
then all
the
of a sudden it
time.
says, let's react to this. This is bad. Then you attack your pancreas or something. So I think
Yeah.
this is a big issue with the hyper vigilant immune system.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. So it's really understanding what that root cause is, and that's why with parents and autism, there can be so many different possibilities, but it's starting in one place and being logical and starting with the basics. And gut health definitely is more on the basic side for sure.
Yeah. So what are the other low-hanging fruit that you go, okay, for most people, here's things that show some benefit?
Well, here would be, I think we're on our third or fourth low-hanging fruit. They're gonna start getting higher.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, yeah.
But I would say hydration. I know this is really basic, but hydration is really important. So many times kids are drinking juices. Not too many kids are drinking soda that much anymore. I think a lot of people have gotten away from that, especially like schools and things like that. But they're drinking apple juice and orange juice and all these different kinds of juices, which really isn't hydrating, and it's a huge amount of source of sugar. And it's kind of masquerading as healthy, like, oh, well, they're drinking apple juice or orange juice, but it's a lot of sugar, and that can be what is also feeding different gut dysbiosis, right? When you're giving a lot of sugar, even though it's in fruit. So with hydration, if a child's not adequately hydrated, you can think about us when we're not hydrated, right? Learning is difficult, sitting still is difficult, irritability, right? You can start to think about all those different things. So hydration with it's hard to get a kid to drink straight up water. Some do, believe it or not, but that's a little bit more difficult. There are these really great different hydration packs where you're just going to have the electrolytes. So for kids with autism, I would stay
Mhm.
away from the ones that have all the like different B vitamins and stuff because you don't know if your child needs it. And if you're giving like Leucovorin, you want to be very mindful of any other B vitamins that you're giving. So for hydration, you would just focus on the companies that have just pure electrolytes in it. And then this way you can really make sure your child is well hydrated because so much can change just from hydration, right? And then with toxins and clearing things out, right? So like you want there to be
Yeah.
enough hydration so that the poop can be formed well, right? Like a
Yeah, so
lot
they're
of
not
things.
constipated too. Yeah, bowel issues are an issue also, right?
Yes, 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 yes. So that's what I
Wow.
would say. I think the last low hanging fruit would be hydration for sure.
Yeah, these are
And
things
something
that,
that's
that
like
people
universal.
don't think about, and there's so many, it's so interesting. Like I was just reading, there's a book like Nature Wants Us to Be Fat, and it's saying basically if you're dehydrated all the time, your body actually stores more fat because it's a storage of water. So that it's saying, okay, when you need water later, you'll be able to break that down and use it. And you go, wow, this is wild. Like vasopressin, how they all interact. You go, this is really wild. But I know there's a lot
Yeah.
of GI complaints too, right? With the
Yeah, I think
autism
about the
diagnosis.
research shows 70 to 80% of kids with autism at one point will have some type of GI issue.
And it's
Um,
very similar, like with Parkinson's disease. They'll have constipation for 10 years before they get the diagnosis. So it's a red a one. And now most people, if you're listening, most people who have constipation is not going to turn to Parkinson's, but it's one of those things you go, let's look at that. Let's look at the gut
it's
maybe. And
important. Yeah, because that's where again buildup of toxins can occur, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
you want to be eliminating every day. You want to have that function of health where you can kind of go through life, handle anything, and your body process it. So if you're constipated, your body can't process it out. So that's where you just would want to focus and start to understand, okay, why is that? What's going on there?
So as how old is your daughter now? She was 3.5 when she got diagnosed.
Yep, she's 15.
And how's she doing?
She's doing great. She's doing absolutely great.
Is she in school interacting with people and all that kind of stuff? Have you seen a difference over the years, or is it?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this part you can edit out. I don't talk about her
Oh,
like
that's okay. We don't have to talk about
specifically.
it. Okay.
Yeah, because the whole idea is what I found is then it's not about like what I did because what I did is not necessarily going to be helpful to someone else.
Exactly.
Right. So
Exactly.
like it's that's the part where I'm very mindful of
Okay,
really
Jack,
pushing
we'll edit out this
against.
part of me asking the
Okay.
question. So we'll just start from there. Yeah, because I think we have so much. I think the big thing is we have so much to learn. It's an area that we just don't know enough. When I started talking about the gut microbiome, friends of mine would say, "Brian, there's no research on that." And I go, "Look, I read like
Oh,
50
cracks
hours
me
worth
up.
of stuff, right?" Like when you see the data, and then one of my good friends who I do a podcast with, I'd love to have you come join us there on Low Carb MD. But now he just this weekend he said, Brian, there's so much information on that. I go, I know. You just have to look. No one looks at that. I
You
never
have to,
looked at it.
yes. Yeah, and that's the other thing. It takes a lot of time to really sort through this quality information. And AI is great. I love AI, but you can't really trust AI when you're making these kinds of medical decisions. You really have to go into PubMed and look for yourself, because it still makes hallucinations and it just makes things up. So
Yeah, there's a lot of bad information. I've seen that where it pulls a terrible study and it uses that as this whole reference point. This is a terrible study, and that's what you're teaching me. And you don't know how much is biased. And that's why I love to hear from you, someone who has a vested interest. You're looking at, go, look, some of this is over exaggerated, under exaggerated. We don't have enough data. When you have two small studies, you go, we need more. What it does tell us is we need more research in these areas, like vitamin
right.
D replacement. Ones we have to do Leucovorin, vitamin D, look at the gut microbiome, make some adjustments, see what we can do there.
Right. And the important thing is for parents to understand there is something they can do. And it doesn't have to be this, strange, out of the box, bizarre thing or risky thing to do. You really want to start with the basics, like you've been asking, the low hanging fruits. If you start there and you can see changes in your child, most parents then just want to ask, okay, what else? It gets much easier to make these logical changes when you have some of these small successes on something basic where not many people are going to argue with you that someone should have a vitamin D level of 15, right? Like that's basic, right? So starting
Yeah.
at those and getting
Yeah,
traction is
fix the obvious stuff. Like if your tire's
yeah,
flat, fix that, and maybe your car will run better. There's obvious stuff sometimes. Like with diabetes, there's obvious stuff. You go, oh, you can't have an insulin of 68. That's not normal. That's not
yeah,
good. We got to
exactly.
make
Yeah,
you more
yeah,
insulin sensitive.
exactly.
So it's common sense, but most doctors don't ever check a fasting insulin or check these things and say we can predict that where you're gonna. It doesn't. I can figure it out. So
Right.
looking at some of the data we have, it's like it doesn't just happen one day where you get type 2 diabetes. Type 1 maybe with autoimmune problem, but type 2, like we have at least 10, 15 years before we get the diagnosis that we can say,
Yeah.
oh, there's a problem, we got to fix this.
Exactly, exactly. That is what the way you want to think about with autism. And the unfortunate part is parents really have to drive the conversation with the doctors. They have to take ownership and say, all right, we're going to figure this out. There's no doctor you can go to that is just going to be like, all right, let me take care of everything for you. Like the parents really have to drive this whole process.
Yeah, and the doctors have to be open to looking at data, looking at what's happening in front of them and saying, well, I didn't know vitamin D. Look, they're doing better. Okay, maybe I'll
Yeah.
use that with my next patient and just see it's a benign thing if it's low. So things like
Yeah.
that, and it's amazing because we always look to, where I live in Arizona, there's a lot of seniors. And so I went to a Alzheimer's support thing and they go, yeah, there's no good treatment. We need to invest so much more in research. And they never talked about lifestyle, stress, sleep, exercise, doing Tai Chi, whatever, all these things that we see, like people can ride bikes with that have Parkinson's and they do better. And you
Right.
go, wow, like well, that's amazing. Why is that? Because that old memory still is there. So there's so
Yeah.
much we can do instead of saying, "Oh, we just throw up our hands. We have to wait for pharma to save us." You go, "There's a lot we can do lifestyle wise to
Yeah.
improve these things."
And I don't see pharma ever being able to necessarily like step in and save autism, because there's so much complexity. There's not going to just be one particular solution. Like leucovorin is not the end all be all, right? And it's generic, right? So there's no pharma coming in to make money. It's great that it's generic, so it's cheap for parents, but again, that's just like the beginning of someone regaining optimal health, because then you have to understand, why are there antibodies?
Yeah, and that was the one thing I was really happy to see because when they were all talking and about what the Leucovorin Tylenol thing, I'm like, I'm gonna see if Leucovorin, who's making that? Oh, Pfizer's not making it, it's
Yeah.
generic. Oh, because I thought maybe they're throwing them a bone, right? Because us docs start thinking that way. Go, did they make some deal behind the scenes that we don't know about? Now they're
Right,
pushing this
right.
all of a
No,
sudden.
it's generic.
But it's
It's
just
generic.
generic so people can look at that and you get the testing done and kind of figure it out. Is there any, and this may, you may not have looked at this, but we see a lot of people, adults that are on the spectrum, they say, is there anything like checking vitamin D3 or B9? You
Oh
can't
yeah.
really check a
Regardless
B9
of the
levels, but you
age.
could do the frat.
Yeah, and anything I discussed today is not age specific whatsoever. It can be applied for a 4-year-old and 44-year-old. So there's certainly anyone so frat, they're looking at frat for, yes, relating to autism, specifically with speech. They're also then you can take it a step further and say, right, a woman who is considering getting pregnant, she might want to take the frat so she understands if she has these antibodies, because there's a correlation between if the parent has it, then more than likely sometimes the child has it. So that's one way that they can. But they're also looking at frat and how these antibodies impact depression. So it's not just necessarily autism related. It happens to be that about 70% of kids with autism have these antibodies, but there's also other therapeutic areas where it impacts, which makes sense, right? You don't know when someone develops these antibodies, whether for kids with autism, they might be 4 years old, but someone might end up developing these when they're mid 30s or something along those lines. So the discoveries here in autism, I think, can really be applied to many other areas as well.
Yeah, it's critical. If it's as common as they're saying it, this is a critical. We got to figure this out. We got to figure this out
Yeah,
because it's way, way, way too common. Almost my daughter's a preschool teacher, and she says every class she has at least two or three kids, like every time in a small class of 12. And you go, oh my
yeah,
goodness.
yeah.
That's pretty tough. So the work you're doing is so great. I've got to ask you just one last question because I know we're short on time here, but what's life's best medicine for you? Like where, or since that's the podcast name, like where do you go when things are hard? Where do you find your peace? What keeps you motivated to do all this research? Like for Theresa, what is life's best medicine? The important stuff.
I would say meditation for
Yeah,
sure. Meditation is where I go. Whether that's a walking meditation just in nature, and I'm trying to just focus on each leaf, watching the leaves fall. Life is so much better when you can make decisions from that centered and grounded place. So for me,
awesome.
that's life's best medicine.
Awesome. Well, I'll tell you, you might be right. I have a new patient of mine yesterday, 89 years old. And I asked her, like, what do you do? She goes, oh, I meditate every day. I do yoga 3 days a week. And I go for walks with my dog and I laugh and I go and have fun. I was like, you know what?
That's
That's going to be better than any supplement you could take. Go and enjoy life a little bit, engage with people, right?
definitely for sure.
And so, how do people track you down? Because and your YouTube is awesome, by the way. I was bummed because I got to see like 4 videos. I'm like, oh, there's so many great. I'm really, you do a great because you're breaking down this research. Here's the research. You can go look for yourself if you want. You do a great job.
Thank
Res,
you. So
res,
I've had my YouTube channel for 10 years now. So there's lots of information. I've been teaching autism science for a long time. So the YouTube channel really is the best place to go. You can also check out, we have a navigating autism platform. So we have health coaches that help parents guide through all of this information and give community. So that's navigatingautism.com. And autism is spelled differently. It's AWE. So it's navigating AWETISM.
Yeah, it's so great. Thank you for reaching out and thanks for coming on because this is such an important thing. And then I'm sure we're going to have a follow up to have the latest research, what new stuff that's coming out. But it's
Definitely.
amazing. It's amazing that there's hope now that we can start looking and not just saying, "Oh, you got this. Too bad. That's the way your life is." And so, as a matter of fact, just as an aside, my brother he does a lot in the manufacturing, and so he has a team of kids with special needs. They're adults, like they're 20 or above type thing and they're crushing like when they're filling product and stuff, they're crushing everyone else because they get there and they get focused and they just do it.
They
And
get
so the other workers are like kind of trying to sabotage them and slow them down because it's making them look bad, you know? So he's telling me, he goes, you won't believe it. He goes, the production that we have is like, and we're having fun and laughing and oh my gosh. So
That's
people out there,
awesome.
if you can employ some of the kids and people who have special needs, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, they're people. They're actual people, and they enjoy life, and they want to be part of it.
Yeah, so yeah, be kind and be kind to yourself, be kind to others. This is really important stuff because we're in a epidemic, it really is. So, it's really
Definitely.
important for helping these people just to do better and enjoy life. And yeah, my niece is just a character. She's funny, makes us laugh and just characters and she's a character for sure. So thanks for all the great work you're doing. And everyone, look her up. Go on YouTube. Very simple. Just type in her name and you'll get it. And it's well worth your time. Even if you're not struggling with autism, it's we're looking at all these things are going to apply to different disease processes. That's what I'm totally
Yeah.
convinced of. I'm seeing this microbiome is screwed up in Parkinson's and dementia, and all these bad things we don't want to get. You think, well, what can we do? What are the toxins we could take
There's
out? What good
lots.
stuff can we do? So it's good that you bring hope. That's the most important thing.
Thank Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.